How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and as you can see, we're back at it, breaking down the latest in Mets land. And folks, I'm so pumped up to get into our big Mets update segment to kickstart the week. And if you're wondering, Wardy, why exactly is that? That's because recent reporting that came out earlier today suggests, not only suggests, but it reaffirms that the Mets are actively shopping in not only the outfield market, not only the reliever market that we're going to touch on, but also the starter market, potentially separate from Roki Sasaki. This is contrary to the initial belief we've heard over the past number of days. So what has potentially changed and why? That is what we're going to deep dive, along with Pete Alonso. What is the latest on his contract status? Should he land back with the Mets? What is that deal going to look like? And ultimately, what is a contract that he's going to find himself landing more than likely in general now this offseason? We heard more on that, folks, and we're deep diving right around 15 plus players in today's video that we're going to touch on for these respective areas. So let me know, out of all these players, which ones make the most sense to you and why in the comments down below. And as a further thank you to each and every one of you for hitting 30,000 subscribers here on the platform, I am giving away a Juan Soto Mets jersey to one lucky subscriber tomorrow here in our live stream on the platform, ranging anywhere from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern is when I'd imagine we'll first go live, so be on the lookout then. All you guys got to do is make sure you're subscribed to the platform, and to comment in the live chat as the live stream is happening. When I tell you guys to comment, I'm going to randomly click on one of them, and whoever I click on will be the winner. We'll get your email information, I'll hit you up, and we'll make sure we get that jersey sent your way. Congratulations in advance to the winner. Good luck to you all, and I hope to see you guys in tomorrow's live show the same way that I hope you guys get involved, should you have interest, of course, by getting involved with our amazing sponsor at BetUS that has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Head over to betus.com.pa today, folks. That way you too can use Wardy's promo code YouTube150 and get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you want to bet on. And my biased New York Knicks fan self is saying, hey, I know we're on a 2-game skid, but we got to bounce back. We got to get out of this. No better way to do that starting tonight. Knicks money line minus 600. We're going to pair that with the Sacramento Kings money line at minus 170 to win outright. This is a 2-leg parlay. That's a $30 parlay to win me 26. So hopefully right around, doubling my money should both the Knicks and the Kings win their games outright. Good luck to anyone that tails these bets today, but please know I'm not a sports betting expert, just a diehard fan that loves to place daily bets here at BetUS. So let's place that bet and let's get it locked and loaded, everybody. Same way that we're now going to get locked and loaded and talking about the latest in Mets land. And I want to give a massive shout out to actually a follower of mine that I saw while scrolling the timeline today from Santo. Shout out to Santo there on X, Mets fan, for being the first to make really note of the latest from Jeff Passan of ESPN, which is what we're getting into, because Passan came out with a piece through ESPN Plus today, and I am a subscriber, but as soon as I started scrolling early this morning, this was one of the first things to pop up on my timeline. So thank you, Santo. Shout out to you. And in this piece from Jeff Passan's latest piece on everything regarding MLB this offseason, when talking about the Mets, this is what he has to say, folks. And I quote, New York's desire to avoid long-term pitching contracts meant the Mets were never really involved with Fried, Snell, or Corbin Burns, all of whom signed for at least half a decade. Rebuilding its rotation with Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, and Clay Holmes comes with significant risk. Though so did the Mets staff last year, and it obviously worked out for them with guys in Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, and others really making strides. Even Jose Quintana, as bad as he was in that starter two in Tampa, he made up for it in great stretches going into postseason play too. So we've seen the Mets get success from their rotation, even when they haven't had the sexiest names on paper, if you will. Otherwise, there haven't been any needle-moving transactions for the Mets, obviously, that we have seen for them to this point in the pitching end, who have been so far perfectly content to bask in their Soto-ness. But there will be more. At this point, Alonso will almost certainly get an opt-out laden short-term contract, which is exactly what we've highlighted on the platform for a good period of time now. Short-term, high AAV potentially, where you have an opt-out after the first and or second year, say a 3-year, $90 million deal contract in that range. Alonso wants at least a 5+ year deal. The Mets probably don't want to even go past 3, and I don't blame them right now, given what his market is looking like. But beyond Alonso, that we see with that deal, and the Mets do have a gaping hole at first, and until another team steps in, the expectation is still that they will renew their vows together, meaning that Alonso will naturally come back to the Mets, which has been the long-lasting belief by everyone in the industry. Same was with Juan Soto going to the Mets in large part, or Passan had it happening, or Ken Rosenthal and many others because he went to the highest bidder. Of course, they can shift Mark Vientos across the diamond and fill the third base void internally or externally, which gives them plenty of leverage in any conversation, but the Mets are still talking about adding an outfielder, and let me make sure that you guys can see this quote highlighted as well. The Mets are still talking about adding an outfielder and relievers and a starter. The winter of Soto is still cooking. The Mets are still cooking, folks, simply put. So let me see the initial reactions again in the comments down below, because let's start briefly here with Alonso. This is one I'm not going to harp on too much. This is common knowledge. It was really about, we know that the Mets and Alonso appear to be at the standoff. Even with the Angels and Artie Moreno, the schmuck that he is, showing an interest in Alonso. Even the Seattle Mariners, who don't have the money to spend but would still love Alonso, especially if they can maybe shed some payroll with the Luis Castillo deal, among other things. You look at some other clubs in the San Francisco Giants and others pursuing Alonso, but to what degree? Right now, everything that feels most likely is that Alonso will return to the Mets, but they got to reach in the middle here, and that's where that 3-year, $90 million proposal makes a lot of sense for both sides. A player option, too, so he can opt out after this upcoming season, hopefully after a great year in 2025, batting behind Soto, and then we can pursue Vladimir Guerrero Jr., maybe still have Alonso if he doesn't opt out, and we shift him to DH. The possibilities are endless, right? But that's where the Mets and Alonso both have equal control. I understand for Alonso, after denying the Mets 7-year, roughly $160 million extension a year and a half ago, he's not going to be happy to be making, say, less AAV and a less guaranteed money of a deal. But that, unfortunately, is what happens when you shoot yourself in the foot. You bank on yourself and a go ahead or do or die year where you're hitting the free agent market as a Scott Boras client, and you don't live up to expectations. You have a second consecutive down year offensively across the board from your career norms the first 3-4 years. And even though your playoff numbers were tremendous, that is still not enough to really separate what is a sizable factor of lackadaisical defense, below average defense. Not that he's lazy, because Alonso isn't. He puts his body out all the time, more than any other first baseman, but it doesn't also always mean that he's in the right position to do so. It goes in hand at times with Alonso not necessarily having the best initial positioning as a first baseman. I love Pete, and I love him putting the body in play, but let's not act like that he's a consistent Gold Glover, even though that award means nothing now. But you get the point I'm trying to make. Base running, same applies. But for Alonso and for the Mets, if this relationship rekindles, should it rekindle, everything is now pointing towards it being that short-term contract, not in favor of what he's looking for. It appears that there is no suitor out there that's going to give Alonso what he wants this offseason, which is at least a 5-6+ year contract. We love you, Pete. We want to see you come back to Queens, but we want to see you come back to Queens at the right price for you, for us, and for what your market is stating your current worth is. So now to go from Alonso, everybody, let's get into other bad options for the Mets this offseason, right? Because as Jeff Passan touches here, he makes note of specifically outfielder fits. Now, outfielder fits we touched on the platform, and the most notable one to come to mind after swinging and missing, which was the Mets on Jock Peterson. They offered a 1-year deal. Jock signed 2 years with the Texas Rangers. The Mets offered a 2-year high AAV deal, same AAV as the Dodgers, to Teoscar Hernandez. He took that 3rd-year option there with the Dodgers, with that deferred money, and the rest is history. Now, the Mets, even though that they still have a linkage to some bats out there that we'll get into in a second, one bat that they've been rumored to be linked to the past week, even though we haven't heard too much credibility of it yet, reliability as to where these reports come from, Anthony Santander, the switch-hitting phenom who hit 44 home runs, over 100 RBIs on that very deep Orioles lineup last year, would be tremendous for the Mets as a short-term DH/quarter outfield option fit. The Mets were to do this would make Santander more of a DH fit than an outfield fit naturally. Yes, you can throw Santander in the corner, especially if you need him to, say, give some reps away of Nimmo, if you want to put Nimmo at DH for a day with the plantar fasciitis maybe still lingering, or if you, say, really feeling ballsy and want to put Nimmo in center still after having Siri and Tyrone Taylor as your current center field options, knowing Nimmo and his health is that big uncertainty there. That's interesting. You can go down that route, but simply put, Santander is the best bat option available in the market for the Mets when looking for outfielder/DH fits, which is why we're not talking about Bregman, because Passan did not make a note of Bregman. Not to say that the Mets are not involved there, but that is not necessarily the emphasis for them at this point in time. It really feels like if that does happen, it will happen for separate reasons that we will touch on the platform either later today or as early as tomorrow. tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. But Anthony Santander, with 3 consecutive seasons of at least 20 or more home runs, would add immediate power, a Venezuelan aura, along with Francisco Alvarez, among others there in this Mets organization, which never hurts, as someone who saw him play for Team Venezuela versus captain of Team Puerto Rico, Francisco Lindor, MPR's team there, matching up 1v1, not 1v1, just against each other in general in the World Baseball Classic in Miami. I saw Santander hit a home run basically before the game even started. I've seen the power, I've seen his clutch ability, I've seen him step up in big moments. He was also one of the most unlucky hitters in Major League Baseball this past year. So, if the Mets can get Santander at short-term high AAV, maybe a 2, tops 3-year deal, they're willing to go there. I think Santander would have the interest, but the fact of the matter is the Mets would also be having him more as a predominant DH than anything else. So the Mets willing to go that far to have a guy be more so their everyday DH. Should that be the case with Vientos as well, if they sign Bregman and still brought in Alonso or a different first base option? Things to think about us Mets fans as we've been pondering all offseason long to this point after the Soto news. Now, to go from Santander, let's go to a bat that we haven't touched on much at all on the platform, and that's because this is a guy that I think his profile is so much better outside of Queens, because I know I'm going with the narrative that he hasn't played well out of San Diego, but it's true. Jurickson Profar, who was a literal stud and all-star that we saw this past season, was very much so a dominant breakout 31-year-old outfield option after doing nothing with the Rockies year prior. Profar having some very strong years that we've seen with the San Diego Padres, but one thing that's been very consistent with Jurickson Profar, one, the defense is not all that good. He's not a good fielder. He doesn't have range at all. He has solid arm strength, but that's it. He's more of a DH corner outfield fit that you'd put in left sometimes. But look at the savant numbers there and all the baseball and all the offensive statistics. They are absolute chef's kiss. They ain't a beauty. Now, the thing about Profar, though, is that you can pick up a trend throughout his entire MLB career, which goes in with why I don't want the Mets to invest beyond Profar beyond, say, 1 year, maybe with a second-year option if they were to go after him, is because Profar is a Jekyll and Hyde hitter. Just like how relievers a lot of the times are roller coasters. Great year, down year, great year, down year. Well, Jurickson Profar has never been a league average hitter for more than 1 year consistently in his career. It has been league average, if not above league average, then below league average. League average or above league average and below league average. He hit for a 139 WRC plus, which means he was roughly 40% better than the average in baseball. Far and away the highest WRC plus he's ever had in his career there. But we also know that the year prior, he was a very poor hitter. We saw the year before that he was strong in the 2022 run with the Padres, but the power was untapped more than any other year with 24 home runs, 85 RBIs, can steal bags for you. Great eye at the plate. That's been consistent with Profar throughout his career. Even with the OBP being low and some previous years sitting more around the 330 range, a 380 isn't all that shocking when you look at his peripherals year by year. He does a pretty good job on commanding the strike zone, handling his chase rates versus his whiff percentage, and really just making sure that he's not swinging too much at the box is what I like about Profar. So Jurickson Profar, who honestly could be a lightning rod for this Mets team. Again, a guy that potentially gives you more offensive upside than the guy that we're about to talk about in a second. But as talented and as exciting as Jurickson Profar is, I have to see it to believe it if the Mets would actually go out of their way to sign a versatile player in Profar who can play left, who can play all over the outfield, really not named center, can give you some reps at first base if you need to, even though it won't be proficient in any of those areas. That versatility is something that might be highlighting for David Stearns to consider when going after a player like him. But the reason why I'm not really going to get hung up on that is because I'm firmly believing that it's going to be a Jesse Winker reunion until proven otherwise. He might not have the sexy savant numbers this past season like Profar did beside me, but what Jesse Winker did do is do everything that the Mets could have asked for. He was their best traded deadline acquisition since Javi Baez, offensively speaking, and the best pure impact-wise since Yoenis Cespedes right around a decade ago now. Jesse, who was always that villain against the Mets during his time with the Reds, Mariners, a little stint with the Brewers, and others, is now perfect and is our little team hero. Tremendous clubhouse character as well. Perfect guy you want on your team, and absolute the guy you want to go up against and want to say, I hate him. I want to try to kick his teeth in or punch him out the way that Willie Adames tried there after they had their base running exchange in the wild card round. Jesse Winker has tremendous numbers as well, and runners with scoring position, high leverage, 2-out hitting, late and close situations. Every key statistic last year where you needed the guy to step up most, he had absolutely jaw-dropping numbers in the 900 plus OPS range. He was tremendous, over 300 average in a lot of these areas, and Jesse Winker also had the home run heroics for the Mets in postseason play. Always very dramatic in doing so, and as a perfect platoon fit as a DH slash you know, a guy that's going to face mainly right-handed pitching while also handling the corner outfield at times, to give Nemo, say, a day off where he could go to DH if you really need him to, or to shift Nemo to center. Either way, Jesse, even though he is not superior defensively at all, can still handle himself in the corner at least normal, where the bat will be proficient versus the defense maybe not so much. So Jesse Winker, between the vibes, between everything he's brought, and really how he fits for this team, I think you could almost argue fits better than anyone else from what we saw last year. But does that mean that I don't want Anthony Santander or potentially Jerkson Profar more? Not necessarily. I want Winker more than Profar. I might make that argument, as crazy as it is to say, just because Profar is projected to have a down year next year after having a great up year this past year. Whereas Winker, I can see more consistency with the team fit being a factor into it. I don't see Jesse Winker putting up the same numbers all year round with any team. It needs to be the right fit. I think the Mets still bow that well for him, should he be willing to be more in that limited platoon role versus an everyday player. But Jesse Winker, I love you. We'll see what happens with him versus other bad options for the Mets this offseason. Now, to go from bad options, let's talk about the rotation, right? We will end things with the bullpen, but let's talk briefly here on the rotation, because we got some key starters to get into. Because Roki Sasaki is the obvious one. The Mets are one of the not necessarily favorites, but they are one of the finalists that we know for Roki Sasaki right now. They are a front runner along with the Dodgers, the Yankees, and a couple other clubs that we know publicly to this point. Roki would be tremendous for this Mets rotation. But to quote David Stern's Mets Pobo himself, going back to the winter meetings this year, he said that landing Sasaki would essentially be a luxury. It's not something that they're banking on or expecting, but they're hopeful that it could happen. But they're not letting it drive their offseason moves in any way. So for Jeff Passan to go out of his way to say that the Mets are still actively pursuing pitching, starting rotation pitching, when the Sasaki aspect is, I'd imagine, separate from that for natural reasons, because Sasaki is far from a certainty for the Mets, that tells you that even with the rotation depth that they have right now, which is of Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, right, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas. Then you also have in, the Paul Blackburns, the Griffin Cannings, the Tyler McGills, the Brandon Sproats, who I think is really going to blossom. The Mets have a lot of quantity. We know that, but the one thing that has still been missing that many could argue is that they're looking for another ace caliber piece, or a guy that has some ace caliber upside. The Mets did a great job this past season on getting starters to give them ace caliber starts at times to really be the head horseman of this rotation when other guys were going down. I think of the 2022 Mets as well, when they had their great 100-plus win season. Taijuan Walker, Carlos Carrasco leading the team in wins, Chris Bassett, all these guys, and I know we have PTSD going into playoffs when we think Chris Bassett and Max Scherzer, but we also know that all those guys had stretches of brilliance. I foresee the Mets having that exact same situation no matter who's in their rotation next year. But if they really want another starter, regardless on their chances of Roki Sasaki or not, this opens the floodgates, everybody, because there are various guys that they can choose from. First, we're going to start with a man that they have been connected to, a guy that they absolutely beat up there in Game 5 of the NLCS, but hey, they want more starters with some high upside. Jack Flaherty certainly has that. Jack Flaherty is one of my least favorite options in the free agent market, because when you look at the K-to-walk ratio, a roughly 10 strikeouts to just over 2 walks, a 3.17 ERA, all the numbers tell you that I should love Jack Flaherty. But this is where the numbers in the eye test simply don't meet in the middle here. And we all saw Jack Flaherty, how much of a soft tosser he can be. Yes, he gets tremendous bite and tremendous swing and miss that we saw with a 90-plus K percentage and the walk percentage, which looks fantastic. But Flaherty, I have concern in how he would handle a market like New York 1, as he's had issues with how he's handled markets in years past, and also in how Flaherty would handle really the big spotlight. It's one thing to be a Dodger where you are really on the back end of things, where you're not the go-to guy for LA, when you have all these other weapons around you, even with their injury-depleted rotation and playoffs. And we saw how Flaherty handled pitching in LA versus pitching in New York. I have my reservations with how Jack Flaherty would project with the Mets, but I do have confidence in our lab. I do have confidence, at least the numbers I'm seeing right down there below, that they do mean something. So for all those reasons, and for a guy that, again, can pitch to an ace caliber starter for you, Flaherty does have that upside, but the difference is that Flaherty also has a downside to be as bad as easily your number 5. That is where Flaherty ranges, based on we don't know consistently what we're getting from him. Can he give us another season of 160, 170 plus innings? That is a big question for Jack Flaherty. And can he do it at this high level of a rate? That's a big question for me. So Jack Flaherty, add him to the mix. The Mets have been involved. We'll see how much longer. Let's also get into everybody. Nick Pivetta. Nick Pivetta is another interesting one because like many others that we have talked about and will continue to, this is another one of those rotation arms that has a qualified offer attached to him. The Mets did reportedly meet with Nick Pivetta throughout the winter meetings. I love Nick Pivetta. If you look at the baseball savant numbers here, they might not be overly sexy in certain areas, but look at the 80th percentile in K percentage, 80th in walk percentage. I like that a lot for Nick Pivetta. And Pivetta, the former Philadelphia Philly turned Red Sox, he was absolutely tremendous this past season. A 3.59 expected ERA, which tells you that for things he can actually control, and not the bad defense around him with the Red Sox at times, he was not a 4.14 ERA pitcher the way that his baseline ERA will tell you. Pivetta in 145 innings this past season, when, mind you, he's been utilized as a starter, reliever, and even closer over the past 3 seasons with the Red Sox. Pivetta would be absolutely nails. I love his pitch mix and what you're getting with the 4-seam sweeper, curve, cutter, slide piece mix. I really think that could bode well. But are the Mets really willing to give up their 3rd and 6th round pick for a short-term starting pitching option? Even the guy who does absolutely have upside, as good as being your number 2, number 3 in this rotation, at the same time, do you want to give up those picks for that high of an upside? Is that the equivalent of Teoscar Hernandez to you because you offered to give up those picks for him? Or is there a difference here and you do see that there is a gap from a Nick Pivetta type versus a Teoscar Hernandez and their immediate impact? I'm led to believe that, obviously, but I'm curious what David Stearns' thought process and philosophy is there. And as we go back actually to Jack Flaherty, if I didn't mention it right, his pitch mix is a 4-seam fastball, slide piece, curveball, changeup, and sinker. That sinker, I'd imagine the Mets may try to play up with more if they were to acquire someone in Flaherty. In the case of Pivetta, I would love to definitely see that curveball usage higher. That curveball usage was a big focal point of his arsenal, now kind of on the back burner a little bit where it's in the heart of things. I would like to see that curveball utilized more when it's at his best. It's nasty, Nick Pivetta, and I'm really just excited to see what's going to happen with him and his offseason because he's one of the top free agent pitchers still available out there. As is the case, everybody, that we see not only with Nick Pivetta, but we also, and this may, again, not be what you want to hear, but we have to talk about him, a Jose Quintana reunion. Now, I know this may shock some of you guys to hear this and you're not in favor of per se. I understand that. But the reason why we're going to at least mention Jose Quintana as a potential reunion on the free agent front before we talk now about trade options for the Mets in a second is because Jose Quintana, when you look at the numbers, again, he put up a respectable 3.75 ERA. The expected numbers aren't in his favor. He is one of these Houdini pitchers where the expected numbers tell you that, yeah, this guy had some luck on his side this year, with especially strong defense behind him, and that is true for Quintana. We all know Quintana proved his ability to be more than a 5 and dime throughout the course of the year for the Mets. Many starts he gave us 6+, especially throughout the second half. He's really nails the rest of times. Jose Quintana also gave us some strong playoff outings. Do I want Jose Quintana back? No. But am I going to cry over if the Mets bring him back, knowing that you can never have enough rotation depth? And that is essentially boxing out a guy in Paul Blackburn potentially out of the rotation and or, a Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill type. No, I'm not upset with that. Again, you can never have enough depth. The Mets want at least 6 quality starters that they can rotate and work with throughout the course of 2025. Jose Quintana doesn't give you crazy upside, but Quintana at his best can still be a number 3 in this rotation for this Mets team. And at his worst, you're looking at, again, one of the worst starters at number 5, number 6 for you. So Quintana, do I want him back? No. Am I mentioning him because the Mets are still active in the pitching market? Yes, and he is a free agent that's still out there. Now, to go from the free agent pitchers, this is where I think a lot of you guys are going to have fun in this conversation with me. Now let's get into talking about the trade options, because when we start with Luis Castillo is a guy that I said just a couple days ago, I don't see a role where the Mets are going to be, in this pitching market anymore. And maybe they won't be, right? Maybe we'll find out in the coming days that, oh yeah, they're active for pitchers, but no, they're not going to be trading for a Castillo type. Luis Castillo is that ace caliber starter for you. Even with the numbers maybe not as pretty as some of the others we reference, he has ace caliber upside. That fastball plays. It is absolutely electric, sitting 96, 97, plus touching high 90s. We all know how deadly as well. If he uses that changeup to his ability again, that used to be one of his best pitches during his time with the Reds, and then the Mariners kind of just put it completely in the back burner of the rotation. Luis Castillo on 3 years still left of his contract, mind you, so we're looking at 3 years, $75 million total. Castillo fits the bill, the same contract as Sean Manaea, the same as Nathan Eovaldi out there, and gives you an ace caliber starter. And because we would be taking on Luis Castillo's contract, we wouldn't have to give up too much, hopefully, for Castillo, but they would like a second base option. The Mets have an abundance of young second base options, whether that's Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio. I really would imagine that the Mariners would dabble in that market. Brett Baty may be someone that they would have interest in too. They don't have at all certainty as to what their second baseman is going to be, unless you say salary dump Jeff McNeil as part of that deal as well to have him over there, be their starting second baseman, okay. But I think the Mets make more of a hole at their second base position that they'd initially like to start the year for fans that are really heavily emphasized on the win now stage. Like it or not, Jeff McNeil as their starting second baseman still may be the best option for the Mets to begin the season, even if I humbly disagree with that. But the big question now with the Mariners is, why would the Mets go out of their way to trade with Seattle if that potentially means them freeing up money to sign Alonso? Should say they acquired a starter before Alonso's market was done. That is where I don't see it happening at all. So I'd imagine that if this at all comes to fruition where Castillo gets traded, it'll happen after the Alonso sweepstakes for the sake of the Mets being the team to actually land him. Otherwise, I just don't see it happening at this point in time. The Orioles are actively involved in the market as well. But either way, folks, it's going to be very interesting to see how this one is going to play out. No denying that whatsoever. So Luis Castillo, let me know if you guys are for or against, if you think it's at all a possibility or you think it's improbable now to happen now that the Mets have shored up a lot of their rotation. Pablo Lopez. Pablo Lopez is a guy that I absolutely love. You look at his expected numbers of 3.7 expected ERA. Lopez I don't love in the sense of how he's fared against the Mets because the Mets have rocked him his whole career. But Lopez has been an ace pretty much against every other team in Major League Baseball, and he has consistently given you innings. Like Luis Castillo, what you would be getting in Pablo Lopez is a guy that can consistently pump out north of 200 innings for you each and every year. And he's only 28 years of age, right? A 3-year, $65.25 million deal left on his contract, 90th percentile on the walk rate, roughly a 10K K per 9 to a 2 walks per 9 this past season. He was absolutely gorgeous. We look at 185 innings there, a 4 ERA, but a 3.7 expected ERA. So I'm loving that too. Give me 1 second, everybody. Need 5 minutes more. Just have to let someone know that I have to go on a work call with. I need a couple minutes more, so apologies for that. But going back to Pablo Lopez, everybody, with the arsenal, the four-seam fastball, which is nasty, sitting 95, the sweeper, which is one of the best in the game, the changeup, the curveball, and the sink piece, and 90th percentile in extension, 89th in chase percentage, 75th in average exit velocity. Pablo Lopez, who the Minnesota Twins would probably love to salary dump already, because they're already giving off those vibes. Same thing with Carlos Correa to a degree. The Mets could hopefully try to shell out a trade where you're not giving up too much of an arm and a leg, because you're taking on this entire salary. The Mets have young MLBS ready talent that the Twins could choose to try to pick from. As somebody reaches the middle for both sides, Pablo Lopez would be an ace caliber starter to pair with Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea in this rotation. And again, any Zeter who's not even 30 years of age, sign me up. Beautiful contract. The value's tremendous. And his first year of his contract was just over $8 million. Made sense why the Twins were fine with it. Now it's over $21 million per year. And that's why they want to shed that salary more, should they have the interest to do so. And last but not least, a final trade target, and then we'll touch briefly on the bullpen. Hopefully not have this be a half-hour long video. We have Mitch Keller. Mitch Keller is a guy that I think makes plenty of sense, especially if there's at all trade interest with the Mets. Maybe Starling Marte going the other way. Not one for one, obviously, but Marte we're going to touch on more in a second, because the Mets, according to Pat Ragazzo, a good friend of the channel on the beat for the Mets through an affiliate with Sports Illustrated, he noted over the past couple weeks that Marte could be traded to a team for a reliever especially. But in the case of the Pirates, they are a very appealing team for the Mets. Mitch Keller, who still has 4 years, $71 million left on his contract, which I love that AAV. That's a bargain right now. They know it's a bargain too, which is why they might as well trade for the value that they have in Keller. Mitch Keller is a guy that unfortunately ended Starling Marte's regular season in 2022 in Pittsburgh, but since then he has been a very consistent starter, sitting right around a 4 ERA or so, but much better than what the Savant numbers will tell you. And Keller in this Mets pitching lab would do wonders, because he has like a 6-7 pitch mix, 4-seam fastball, sink piece. We see the cutter, we see the changeup, we see my goodness, great. You literally have a stupid amount of pitches I'm actually looking at in his arsenal right now. Wow, you got a lot. So we're looking at 6-7 pitches there in the arsenal. And even though the Savant numbers aren't sexy, you're getting a workhorse, a guy that's literally pitched north of 200 innings the past 3+ years, and a guy who's only 28 years of age with multiple years of control that I think is really going to benefit the Mets greatly if they can acquire him. What type of trade would it take to get it done with the Pirates for a team that would like to shed this payroll? That's a great question, but eating the salary really wouldn't hurt the Mets. For the Pirates, who just invested in him back in February a year ago, there's already rumblings of them being willing to shed payroll of him and or a more controllable guy that I think makes a lot less sense for them and Jared Jones. But now, guys, let's go from starter options and let's get briefly to the bullpen, because we talked about guys on Ryan Stanek on a potential reunion over the past couple days on the channel, so check that out in case you haven't already. The same way that we talked about Ryan Stanek, who, again, expected ERA 3.46, chef's kiss. Flat ERA roughly 5, doesn't matter. Again, wasn't good with the Mariners, was good with the Mets, was really good in the playoffs for us, which was awesome. He's reliable. We appreciate that. Brooks Raley, the lefty, bringing back coming off a constructed Tommy John surgery. I see you absolutely have to do it right. Raley has been nails for the Mets and his year plus in the organization. They need more lefty options in this bullpen desperately. But then we get on to David Robertson, who we touched on the platform multiple times past couple days. D-Rob, a short-term high AAV fit, would be the perfect setup option for Mr. Edwin Diaz. There is no denying that whatsoever. David Robertson with a 3 ERA, a ridiculous 12.4 K per 9 to 3.4 walks per 9, a 2.65 FIP, a 3.22 expected ERA. For a guy that's now going to be entering his age 40 season or so, David Robertson ages like a fine wine, and he has won it all with the Yankees. He knows what it takes to win New York. He loved his time, his short stint in 2023 in the first half where he dominated with the Mets. Now it's finally bring him in and have him be the setup guy that he was supposed to be 2 years ago with Edwin Diaz. They never got the chance to be with Edwin faltering with injury in the World Baseball Classic. D-Rob, we love you. Come back. You got the fastball. You got everything that we could want possibly, and then some. And last but not least, everybody, I will leave you with, yes, David Bednar. Let's talk briefly on the Pittsburgh Pirates, all right? Once more, David Bednar is coming off of a down year there that we saw for the Pirates, but he has been an absolute nails reliever and nails closer for the past number of years, and still on a 1-year contract with a 2027 free agent because he has 1 more year of arm, I believe, $4.51 million contract. David Bednar had a 5.7 ERA, almost 6, but a 4.28 expected ERA, so had some really unfortunate luck that we saw there, and when he looked at what he can control, he was a better pitcher, a far greater pitcher, had some bad yips in the first half of the season. He just couldn't get it closed down to save his life, but he wouldn't have to be a closer for the Mets, right? Maybe in some situations, few and far in between, but Bednar could be a lightning rod setup option for you. He throws absolute gas. Add him there as a setup option for Edwin Diaz, and then give up Starling Marte. You know, we know the Pirates love the reunions of their veterans and the Andrew McCutchens. They love the veterans and many guys in recent years. Bring in Starling Marte, haven't finished his career there, restarted, and I know Marte's still a productive hitter, but if the Mets sure up their DH outfield options the way they're trying to do right now, that makes Marte all that more expendable. Trade Marte there, eat the majority of his salary, bring on Bednar. If they want another piece, a young, controllable piece with Bednar, okay, just hopefully nothing too significant because he's coming off of a down year. The value isn't peak for it all at all for Bednar. He could thrive in this Mets pitching lab greatly. Coming off of a down year is exactly when I would want to buy in on Bednar, because that is the David Stearns philosophy. That is the David Stearns way. But we've seen Bednar consistently churn out some great outings as one of the better relievers in all the National League. So David Bednar, add him to the list as an interesting trade option should the Pirates and the Mets have interest, should a relationship happen there. That's not going to be as lopsided as Daniel Vogelbach for Colin Holderman. But that is what I'm going to leave you with, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you feel about all the respective players that we highlighted? Which ones make the most sense versus least sense? And ultimately, what is next for Alonso, his contract in the Mets this offseason? Let me hear it down below. Thank you guys again for watching. As always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.